Okay, so I'm here with Jens Linell. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure.
So this is episode 6 of the podcast, and it is the first one that I'm conducting in person, which is a great feeling. I mean, we're living in the future basically with the internet and all that stuff. So it's amazing that I can speak with people all over the world via Skype and things like that. But there's still something quite different about like an in-person conversation.
Oh yeah, I miss a real conversation.
Yeah, I guess we all do these days.
I discovered the one thing that makes like Zoom calls or Skypes really hard is that I can't look into your eyes at the same time as you're looking into mine.
I noticed that as well. Like, so sometimes I try to like deliberately look at the camera, which also feels very weird.
So if you look at the camera, I can look at your eyes on my screen, but then my eyes are on the screen and not on the camera, so you can't see my. So it's like
Yeah. So maybe in the future they will invent some kind of technology that like combines the camera and the screen. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, they have to do better. Come on, Google.
But anyway, it's great to be here in person. We're actually at Riksen in Oslo, which is a really great folk music venue in Oslo.
Yeah, very important.
Quite a unique place, really. And they were very kind to allow us to do the interview here. So when I decided that I wanted to make this podcast some months ago, I knew that I wanted to have you on eventually.
Oh.
Because I think you have a lot of interesting things to say about folk music in general, and
hopefully,
yeah, we'll see. I'm sure it'll be.
Time will tell.
But like, you have many hats, but you're a percussion player.
Yeah, that's my sort of main
gig.
Main gig, yeah.
So I would like to talk about percussion, the history, or sort of the role of percussion in maybe Scandinavian music most of all, but maybe even like just folk music.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how it kind of differs from the role of percussion in, say, pop and music that most people are used to listening to.
Yeah.
And I also want to touch on one of your newest projects, which is the Folk Music Academy, which is a really, really cool thing. But before we go into any of that, maybe you could just quickly introduce yourself to those of the listeners who aren't familiar with your work already, so we kind of know where you're coming from with all this.
Yeah. So my name is Jens Linell, and I'm right now I'm 37 years old, and I started playing drums when I was around 7-8 years old. So actually around 30 years now, and it's sort of my dad is a musician, a guitarist, a trained classical guitarist actually.
Okay.
In Trondheim.
Really?
Of all places, but he has been his main occupation has been a music teacher for all these years, and he's an amazing music teacher. I decided earlier that I would not become a music teacher, and now I am a music teacher.
There you go.
That was my education. So I really love teaching music as well, and I learned a lot from my dad, Tommy. And I've been into folk music for around 20 years almost. And I can go a bit deeper on how I got started and stuff. But as a brief overview, I've been playing in different bands. My sort of main band is Sver, which is a Norwegian, Swedish sort of.
How do you describe it?
Yeah, epic Nordic folk is our.
That's a pretty good description.
And these days we tour mostly actually outside Scandinavia, mostly in the States and Europe. But
just to backtrack a bit, did you start in some other genre of music before you transitioned into folk music?
Yeah, absolutely. When I started playing drums, I didn't really. I didn't even know that there was different genres of music.
No,
I just liked. My dad was working in the studio at his school, and he let me into He was mixing in the control room, and he just let me into the room, so I could join him for a couple of nights. And he just let me into the actual studio room.
Cool.
And I couldn't really get the synth to work, and my dad was like occupied. And I couldn't get there was like chord. The guitars didn't sound that much. There was electrical guitars, and then there was a drum kit, and that had instant sound.
Yeah.
and instant like joy and happiness when I started playing.
This was before the age of like electronic drum kits. And
Yeah. So this was when I was in the late 80s, when I was 7, 8 years old, I guess. No, 7 actually. And I had my first teacher at 8, and I played. I thought I was really good at drums, and then I sort of realized when I got to when I started studying it when I was around 16 that I wasn't, and I had a lot of ground to cover. So that was a really important moment for me, was that I got into a music program when I was 16. From that goes from like 16, 18, 19 years old. And during that time, a lot of things happened, and that sort of focused me into music more than what music had been for me before.
Okay.
So I got totally obsessed with practicing, and I developed some sort of discipline for practicing. Then when I was 16, that I still sort of can go into when I have the urge for it. And around the same time, 16, I'm from a village called Ransäter in Värmland. I moved to Ransäter when I was 10. So I was born in Östersund up in Jämtland.
I'm not sure. Did we mention that you're Swedish? I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm Swedish.
Which is the neighboring country to Norway.
Yeah,
or like big brother in a way.
Yeah, and I've been. So I'm from Jämtland, which is on the west part of Sweden, very close to Norway, and we moved down to Värmland, which is also close to Norway. So there's always been some kind of connection.
Norwegian connection.
Yeah, my dad was studying in Norway and stuff like that. So definitely, and then in Ransäter, they moved to Sunne, but Västerna Teater or Västerna Theater, a really, really great theater company that combines folk dance, folk music, and sort of folk costumes, you could say. But they design their own, and
it's really amazing what they've managed to create there.
Like,
it's extremely impressive.
Around this Stinnebom family, so Leif, Magnus, and Inger. They've done, and I started out as a technician. The first year they had not technician. That's too. That sounds too. I was just running around and pulling ropes and putting clothes on people and taking
like a stage technician.
Yes, on the lowest part. And then the next year, for some reason, I got into. I was a part of the band.
But did they have that big venue that they have these days?
Yeah,
like the big barn?
Yeah, that was the first time that I started playing there when the second year they had that theater, a play called Kejsaren och Portugalien. And for me, that was a very important moment when because then I've been in school and I've been starting playing jazz. I thought that was really cool, and it was like difficult music, and I played a lot of classical percussion, marimba, and that was also like difficult and hard and really cool to play. And then folk music for me, because in Ransäter we have a really big sort of fiddle gathering every summer in June, and also accordion gathering in July. And I thought that was very, very geeky and like weird, and it didn't connect with me at all.
No.
And then suddenly I did a project on my mom is also a teacher. She had a theater school in Munkfors. And she made a project with Västerna and her students. And then my mom, she just pushed me into that project. I was like, nah, I don't really. But yes, you are going to do it.
Okay.
And I will make sure you get even like school credits for it. And then I tried to play like a djembe, or I can't even remember what kind of drum it was, with polska. I was like, that's easy. It's just 3, 4, and maybe like a jazz waltz or something. It's easy peasy, no problem. And it was like, it sort of failed instantly. Or I didn't even understand that it was failing.
No.
I was like told that it was failing. I was like, oh my, what? Okay, so there's, and then you feel really bad, but it's like you meet this forest for the first time, and it's like it's very thick, and you're not really sure if you want to enter the forest. I can feel like that sometimes with different kinds of music, that you have to sort of get through something to understand what's in there.
Sure.
And then see sort of the beauty of that type of forest. And for me, well, I can definitely not say that I was like any kind of a musician at that point. I was just 16, 17 years old. So, but then at that point, I've been playing for around 10 years. And as most teenagers, they think that they're like pretty good at everything. But with the folk music, I just couldn't do it. So eventually, the only thing I could do, with the help of Inger, she was like, Jens, look at the feet, like it's a heartbeat, like gong gong. Because in Sweden we stomp usually on 3 and 1 in the polska, which is a 3-beat. So we usually stomp like 1, 2, 3, 1. That was the only thing I could do first.
But did you have any other percussion players to get inspiration from, or was it you only learning from fiddlers and?
Well, at that point, a guy called Kribba or Christian Svensson, who also worked at that theater, who later also played in Harv, a really good group, a Swedish band. And so he was a part of the theater that year, and he showed me some things. And one of the most important things he showed me was, so like, how do you play gangar? Because they also play gangar.
Which is a type of dance, right?
Yeah, it's a type of dance, a Norwegian type of couple dance that exists mostly on like the southwestern part of and west part of Norway. And he said, like, you just do this, and it's like gong 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 gong, and then the first beat is the downbeat. And I was like, what? Because for me, that beat is a shuffle beat. I learned that when I was 8.
Yeah, like you used a back beat, like. So it's the opposite.
And it's sort of opposite. And like, are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. And so for me, that was like a really amazing moment, because I could connect that with some African music. Because at the same time, I played a lot of African drumming, or African is not the correct. I was playing music from mostly from Senegal, through and from the west coast, like the western part of Africa. And in some of those rhythms, you had that sort of beat that you did usually like on a bell. That you had like a king 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 king. So for me, it was like a connection to that music, and then the Norwegian gangar. And that always happens to me when I listen to rhythms. I connect them with other stuff that I have that I've heard, and I guess everybody does that. And that's a way to sort of see if you how can you sort of, you can listen to a rhythm, but everybody will hear it differently because of their background.
I suppose, yeah.
So for some persons, a springer sounds like, oh, that's a telespringer, I might say, but no, that's actually this telespringer from Tin by this player. Might someone else can hear that. And then if you're from I don't know, Tunisia, it's like someone is playing fiddle.
Yeah. yeah. That's kind of like,
so the context of your previous knowledge
obviously
always sort of guides and projects itself upon your listening, I think also.
I mean, I had similar experiences with folk music as you had in the beginning, even though like I got into it way later than you, in my mid-20s basically. But by that point, I had done a lot of music in like jazz and pop, and I had a lot of like musical luggage. But when it came to folk music, first of all, I didn't understand it at all. As you said, like someone is playing the Hardanger fiddle was everything I could hear.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's quite interesting, like it can be hard to perceive sometimes that other people are experiencing music so different from you.
But it's very, very interesting, I think, that fact that someone can hear a rhythm and a melody differently because they have a different sort of culture baggage. I find that very, very inspiring. But so there I was. I couldn't play, and because of the fact that I couldn't, I got really interested.
Yeah, it's like a challenge.
Yeah, and I'm still there. I mean, I've been playing this music for 20 years, and I feel most of the time that I still doesn't have a clue. I know some things that helps me that I can play, but suddenly there's like a new little rhythmical, because for me it's usually rhythmical cues. And I also started playing Hardanger fiddle maybe 12 years ago, so
cool.
I can get into why and how when we get there. But so from that point, I started working at this theater, and I worked there during the summer for 3 years. At the same time as I went to school, and I got to play with some really amazing young folk musicians, and being guided by Magnus Tinnerbom and Leif Tinnerbom, and those guys was an incredible humbling experience for me, and to be a part of a play that we played for. It was sold out every show basically.
Yeah, it's really amazing what we've been able to do there.
And it's so when I got back to school, and it's like you go and play like a jazz gig at a pub, it felt weird because you didn't have like 450 people crying, and so
and so you thought that folk music was like that.
Yeah, I guess so, and so because that was my start. I didn't start in a spelmanslag or anything like that. So for me, even because my start was like in theater music, in the meeting of folk music and theater music, and at the same time, those years I also started seeking up and learning more about the music, of course, and playing more folk music during the year, and going to fiddle gatherings and actually trying to learn more. Absolutely, but the starting point was actually Västanå, and I think because of that, I had this sort of room awareness, or like a theater perspective on how you perform music, and I've kept that in a lot of my. I've been usually the one pushing that in a lot of different projects and bands, and that has been with me up to this day.
So what are you talking about specifically? Like
just awareness of the fact that when you do a concert, you're in a room. How can you use that? And working, I like to work with people from the theater world, basically. So I just finished, to jump really fast forward to the present, I just finished a master's degree in performance here in the Music Academy here in Oslo, just like 2 weeks ago. And to really summarize it, that was like 3 different pieces, and one piece was like playing solo Hardanger fiddle music on drums, and then how to make sure that you could dance to it. So dancing part of the folk music was important, and then the sort of theater or that sort of mindset of knowing the lights in the room, how really thinking through the whole show.
Yeah.
So I worked with that.
It's a visual experience just as well as a music experience.
So and I got to work with Silje Hålien as a dancer, and she has been amazing and helped me a lot with the Valdresspringa groove, dancing and playing with her. And then I had Ottar Kåsa as a teacher, and Håkon Högmo, Helge Nordbacken, and others, and Kai Jonsen, a really good director here for theater here in Oslo, also a professor at the theater school here in Oslo. So and he has helped me a lot with that sort of aspect of it. And I think that came from the start in Västanå.
Yeah.
And after a while in that journey, I got into a school up in Bollnäs, and I decided that I wanted to learn the tambourine, because I didn't know the tambourine.
No.
And I had heard of course I had heard Hedningarna, which was like one of the most famous bands in Sweden, and they started in the late 80s and had their like hit album Kaxi, I think 92. So I knew about them, and Magnus played with Hedingarna also.
Magnus Stinnebom.
Yeah, he started playing. Yeah, he started playing with them in the late 90s, and also this drummer I talked about in the start, Kribba, is his nickname. And so he also started playing with Hedingarna. So they came around the theater sometimes, and there was like really like, oh my god, I was like starstruck when I saw like Totte and Anders Norden. So it was, and the percussionist in that band, he's called Björn Tholin, and he stopped playing with them around 2000, I think it was. But his way of using a specific type of tambourine was what I wanted to learn, because Magnus knew a little bit about it and he showed me a little bit, but not enough for me to sort of. So I went to that school and I told my friends, I'm gonna go up to Bollnäs for a year and I'm gonna study tambourine. And like, what? How in
sounds pretty lame.
Yeah. You're gonna stand there for like a year and you're like
But actually, could we just go back a little bit and get back to the tambourine?
Yeah.
Because for me, when it comes to percussion in traditional music, especially like Scandinavian traditional music, is that the music is, and I talked a little bit about this with Guro on the previous show as well. The thing is, this music is kind of created as a package, you know. It's like most of it is fiddle music, and it's kind of evolved to stand on its own.
Absolutely.
And it's like, for this reason, there's like, you have a melody, but there's also rhythm in the melody. There's a lot of like subdivisions, and because it's made for dancing, right? So the melody itself has to contain rhythm, and it has to contain a catchy melody, hopefully. And a lot of time, there's also like harmonic information baked into the tune itself as well. And I find that it can be hard to add something to that as an accompanist or like a percussion player. It can be hard to add chords and rhythm to something that is already such a finished package, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And like in Norway, I'm sure you will know more about this than me, but like in Norway and Sweden, we haven't had like a percussion tradition for that long, in my knowledge. So I'm curious, like, how would you approach this music as a percussion player?
That's a really, really good question, and one of my absolute favorite subjects. So I thought about a lot. And so I was talking about this forest that I met when I understood I couldn't do it. I didn't understand the rhythms, and how I heard the rhythms, and then what I played, what I did stopped the flow of the rhythm for the melody player.
Yeah.
So
she was actually like taking away from the music rather than adding to it.
I was taking away, and I was destroying the beat mostly. And so what I did from like the early 2000s was that I stopped playing drum kit for around 10 years. I wasn't really good at it anyhow, but I wanted to find out, and this is not like a conscious choice, like I'm gonna stop for 10 years and then we'll see. It's like I just did it, and I went to the school, started playing the tambourine for Björn. He taught me a lot of the basic techniques, and I just have taken it further from there. And the most basic principle and thing to understand, as you said, is that within this context of both fiddle dance music, flute, munharpe, vocal dance music, anything, you as a drummer, you are not needed.
No,
there is no need for you. For if the point is to get people to dance, there's no purpose for you there. You're not needed to make people dance. If you look at, for example, another music that I studied for a couple of years, like Afro-Cuban music, would be really hard without the drums.
No, because it's kind of evolved in the tradition.
Yeah, and the Afro-Cuban music is drums and vocals. So the melodies there are not as important. They are not the drivers. You have the rhythmical section driving things, and then the melody flows. They call it like sobre la música, so like on top of the music.
Yeah.
So play over the music and sing over the music and stuff like that. But in this tradition we're talking about now, like a lot of Scandinavian and Nordic traditions, it's melody driven. As you said, everything exists in the melody. And I had a workshop with the great multi-instrument Ole Möller when I was
maybe my biggest hero.
Yeah, he said that, like, guys, because at that time it was just me and another guy playing guitar, so we were guys, and he was like, "You're not needed. Remember that." Like, and you can hear that, but to actually understand it,
I think it's an important thing to actually,
and not just okay, that's cool to know. No, you have to embrace that and like, okay, so why would it be important for me to play drums? Well, there is not that much bass in a fiddle. There's a lot of room for low notes. If you want to put a fiddle on a really big festival stage, it might sound a little bit small. But I can add color, basically. I can add like audio color to the fiddle music. But to do that, I first have to understand a way to do it without breaking up the flow for the melody player. So I have to go from a normal sort of drummers. If you look at like pop music and also a lot in jazz music, it's although it's more a spectrum of like, are you the time sort of keeper?
I mean, jazz can be almost anything these days.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, doesn't mean anything anymore.
But are you, as a drummer, you're used to being in a role as a timekeeper, and people look to you to sort of keep time. And if you're good at on that or not, that's another question.
Yeah.
But that's usually the sort of standard role, and that really doesn't work as much within this context. You can do it, but that will limit the possibilities for the melody player to express themselves.
So what do you see then as your main purpose in the folk music? Like, if it's a jam or a band, like, how do you see your role as a percussionist in this type of like Scandinavian music?
I see myself as a sort of second voice player, or sometimes melody player. So I play melodies on the drums, even though I don't play the melodies on the drums. Sometimes I play the actual melody on the tambourine or a bass line or something, but I'm a follower. I follow the melody player.
And I think that's like a key difference from what you were touching on with pop music, in that in pop and rock music, we're so used to thinking about like these layers of, you have like the bass and drums in the bottom layer, and then maybe you have some chords on top of it, and then the melody usually sits on top. And it's not always even necessary for the drummer to have an idea of what the melody will finally be.
No, that's true.
Whereas you can't approach folk music like that at all. But as people coming from the outside, like as drummers, as guitar players, in the beginning, that's how we approach the music. Like, at least that's how I kind of did it in the first way, and in the first place. And as you say, like, you realize it doesn't work after a while. You need to really know the melody and kind of play the melody, as you say. The difference between, or the borders between what's an accompaniment and what's the melody isn't there in the same way.
Yeah, and you can learn the melody, but you also need to know the sort of context that the melody appears in, and the tradition that it stems from. And so as a drummer, your role is not to be a timekeeper. In my sense, you can do that also, but the important role to learn, if you're gonna play guitars or piano or drums or anything, to most kinds of Scandinavian folk music, at least that's my sort of area that I know most about. Then you need this role of a follower, that you can follow the melody and also take the melody and lead the melody. That's the next sort of step. And if you can use those two roles, then you can sometimes use them like in arranging tunes. So now I go into this more drummer role, that I set the beat here, and you play within that structure, and then I can let loose and I can follow the melody in this part instead.
Yeah.
So it gives more tools to play with and against and under and on the side of the melody. And for me that took a long time to understand, and from like 2000 to around 10 years I was very focused on that part. And after a while I during that time I went to Cuba and I studied that kind of music. I came back and then I started the music college in Gothenburg. I got bored, and Jonas Simonsson is a great musician from the band Grupa, and he's also the head teacher in Gothenburg. He told me like, well, you like Norwegian music, why you just take half a year instead of just quitting school, just take half a year in Norway, in Ulebull. And that was in 2000. The spring of 2009, I went to Ulebull,
which is like a music academy in Norway for folk music.
Yeah, I have a very nice special curriculum where you are there for 1 week, and then you have 3 weeks where you sort of meet your masters and you study, and then you meet at the school 1 week each month. And I lived there, so I had
would be too much freedom for me, I think.
Yeah, no, but and there I got the opportunity to borrow a Hardanger fiddle, which was nothing. I didn't plan on that. So I started playing the Hardanger fiddle in 2009. I hadn't played any fiddle at all before.
How old were you when you picked it up?
Around 28 then, I guess, or maybe 27. Yeah. So for me, the idea wasn't to be like a really good Hardanger fiddle player. I wanted to understand the melody more. I was still on that sort of quest. So to understand how the melody is physically being produced, what is the sort of different, how does it feel to play that bowing pattern or that melody? And then I just sort of fell in love with it. And I've been playing to and like off and on Hardanger fiddle and some fiddle since then. And these last 2 years I've been doing it a lot at the school. And I even had Håkan Högmo as a Hardanger fiddle teacher this last year. And it has helped me so much to understand the melody and how
I can imagine.
the
like because the melodies they're made on the fiddle.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's something about getting an understanding for where they come from, I suppose.
And also that the dance beat or the beat that the melody player usually so stomping with their feet. There's a lot of stomping going on in Scandinavia, different kinds of stomping, and sometimes
lots of debates about.
And sometimes drummers think that they should only focus on the stomp, and that's a good place to sort of start your quest. But you can't end there because a melody, a folk music melody, is something that is. It's up to the player to sort of make it to a living thing,
and it's not constant from bar to bar.
It's not constant, and you're playing with the dance beat, and you're playing around it, and not all the bowings is just on where you're supposed to put down your feet.
No,
they're usually on other places, and so trying to get that into your sort of system so you can use it, and instead of, because that's all the little things that you destroy when you don't really understand the basic structure of the beat. Like a polska or a springar is way harder than, for example, a waltz. Is actually a bit easier to follow for a drummer because it's more consistent.
But now you're talking about the asymmetrical aspect of the rhythm.
Yeah, exactly. That and also.
Can you just describe what that means for people who don't understand Scandinavian music?
Yeah, so in Sweden we call it polska, and there's a lot of different kinds of polskas. And in Norway and in Sweden it's called springlek or spränglek, and
depending on where
you are, or pols or finskos pols, rörosits pols. Then you move a bit over, and it's called springlek. Yeah, and then suddenly it's called springar. But it's kind of it's the same kind of dance, and it's in 3, and it's has a lot to do with like where the 1 is, and also where the second beat appears. And so for me it's.
But the thing is, like the beats they're not equal in length, which is the strange thing if you're coming from the outside.
Yeah, you're not. So what I wanted to say about that is sort of my main problem when I hear jazz drummers playing folk music is that it is not a syncopation.
No.
It's the beat.
Yeah. Which can be hard to wrap your head around.
It's not hard. It's impossible for most people to wrap their head around. And that is it's
almost like a philosophical discussion.
Yeah, but so for example, just to illustrate, like the like a Rödåspolska or Värmlands polska or something has like they sometimes calls it like a short one. And that will be like dum da pong 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. And then it's easy to think that it's 1 2 3 1 2
exactly.
3 1 2 3.
It's like a shuffle.
And think of it like a 9/8 rhythm. And many people do that, and they then you sort of, in my opinion, you take away a little bit of space for the melody player, and
you force them into some kind of a box.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what drummers are really good at, forcing people into a rhythmical box, because that's their job usually.
In many genres, yeah.
Like you have to keep people in line. If there's a lot of people playing, or if it's just not even a lot of people, just more people than you. But so understanding that is like 1 2, it is the second beat, and if you learn the dance, which is really important, then you feel why it's the second beat, and you need, because playing for dance is like moving a lot of flesh around, basically. So you have to push them around, because a lot of this dancing is a couple dance, and it goes on. It's a circle usually. So you're sort of moving forward, but always in a circle. And you need that sort of movement forward all the time, and then this beat helps you. Like 1 2, you get like forward on the second beat, and understanding that it's not a syncopation is really important. And it's super interesting, and there's a lot of different opinions on whether this sort of using the term of like asymmetrical really helps or not, because I mean no one was talking about that way back when this music was actually like really hip, and everybody was just, that was the only music.
It was just music.
That was just music, and that was the music that they had to dance with, and they liked it. Most people, I guess. and because like in the really long time ago, even the church was like, if you in Sweden, they have contracts for when you were working in the church as a klockare or kyrkoherde, which is like the person playing the organ and fixing a lot of stuff around the church. They also had in the contract that you should be able to play to dance.
Okay, really?
So they were paid by the church to play to dance, and then later the church got all. They don't have in the 19th century. They got like, oh no, you can't. It's the devil's music.
Yeah, they don't have a reputation as like being a very positive.
But this
about
like
dance.
earlier in the 18th century, this is like at least from one parish, they had this contract, but you have to be able to play. So
it says something about how important dance was in the society. Then?
Exactly, and for us now, dance is. You have to remember that this music is a social type of music. It can be on a stage and you can listen to it, and that's a newer form of it.
Yes, yeah.
That's from like the late 19th century, basically, and then it's social part, which means that you play music and the whole room sort of starts doing music. Because for me in my head, when you're dancing, you're doing music. And when you're playing music, you're dancing. Yeah. So there's not really a divide between that, because even when you're playing, you're moving your body, you're doing movement. Most people do. Some people are really good at being super stiff, but dancers, they make a lot of sound when they're moving around on the floor. And they emphasize beats and like, hey, and they give energy. And
it's an interesting synergy between the music and something that even a lot of musicians today, myself included, don't get to experience as often. Like, I mean, jazz used to be dance music.
It was, yeah,
but like,
dance
how
music.
many jazz musicians play for dancers these days? So
yeah, and learning that how to play for or with or whatever word you want to use. Dancing is very important, and I'm actually as I said, my master's was a lot about this connection with dance, but I did it in like a because I'm still sort of a little bit afraid of like playing percussion music on in like open official capacity for dancing. I can do it. I do it sometimes, but I because I have such respect for that, for the music. So I really want it to be really sort of grounded, and I have to know that it's possible to do it. So I'm approaching that subject very carefully.
Yeah.
But so within the master project, I worked with Silja, and only she was dancing, and in the show, both me and her were dancing, and she was playing. So we were trying to work with this sort of opening up that sort of divide that usually exists between like dancer and musician, which I find really interesting.
It's a bit of a tangent, but I feel that we have moved so much of music and singing and dancing up on the stage now. That used to just be a way for regular people to express themselves. Maybe not playing music was maybe mostly for specialized people, but I mean, people in Scandinavia used to sing a lot more. Like when people got together, they would sing, but these days we leave the singing to the professionals. And even dancing is kind of viewed in the same way now. And I'm not saying one thing is better than the other. I'm just saying it's a big change.
But exactly, that's a really interesting point. We are sort of in a we professionalize everything.
And like every folk musician in Norway now has been going to the academy for 5 years or more. So, but back 50 years ago, no one of the fiddlers in Norway had gone to any kind of music school. So it's a very different approach to the music, obviously, from these two groups.
Yeah, and I think that both here in Norway and in Sweden, they are dealing with these issues within the organizations for the folk music. Yeah, I think in a pretty good way, because it's important to have. I think it's, well, I'm biased because I'm working as a professional musician, but I think it's important to have professional musicians sort of pushing boundaries. And that's not only up to professional musicians. Amateur musicians do that also within their space, and both. And I think that the social part of it is very, very, very important. Just getting together one day each week, learn a new tune, play tunes you already know, play a little bit for dancing. I think that's.
But what I fear sometimes is that, like, the level of the. I'm not saying that it's a problem that we have very good musicians or performers of folk music. That's obviously a great thing, but I'm just afraid sometimes that people will get afraid of touching of trying to play themselves or sing themselves because people. And we hear a lot of the music that we hear these days, it's so perfect on TV. And back in the days, people would, like, if you ask people today if they can sing, most people will say they can't sing, which is rubbish. But if you ask someone to sing in Norway 50 years ago, like, they would sing. Well, that's my guess anyway. So anyway, that was a tangent. Another thing I want to ask you about was how do you feel about, when it comes to percussion, sounds and textures as a percussionist in Nordic folk music? Because, I mean, especially in Sweden, you see all these folk percussionists with their like folk kits. It's kind of developed into a thing, hasn't it? Like with certain sounds.
Yeah.
And when someone plays like folk music on a regular drum kit now, it almost sounds wrong in my ears.
Yeah, it's for some reason there are. I think I might be totally wrong with this, but I think there's been sort of more exploration and from percussionists in Sweden that have actually gone like really deep into the music, myself included, and of course.
When did this start, you think?
Well, I think it started back in the around in the 70s when they started playing like some bands started playing a little bit with rock bands.
Yeah.
So and then also Fila Folket was started, and they play maybe more in the 80s, but and then of course with Hedningarna, and of course Väsen, when they took in André Ferrari, who is an amazing percussionist and an amazing drummer. He's just a monster of a musician. Like Världens Väsen is like the sort of their my sort of peak Väsen moments with him, because he sort of, and he used a lot of closely mic'd drums and it didn't look that it had that many drums or sounds, but it could get so much out of it. And one student of his, Petter Berndalen, who studied a little bit in the start at least with André, and then just took his approach to it to a completely new level.
Yeah.
And Petter is an amazing percussionist, and he developed his little kit and his technique with actually the same tambourine that I use, but he plays it on a snare stand and with with one stick and one hand usually. And he does a lot of different things. He's a wonderful human being, and absolutely a role model for how you can approach the fact that what I was talking about your role as a percussionist within the context of Scandinavian folk music. He's a great ambassador for that. And I think that for some reason, I don't really know, there are not that many players that have done the same with Norwegian folk music, that I have heard at least. Of course, you have Terje Isungset in both Utla and Gropa, which is he has a really cool style, and he's been playing that sort of. But he comes in my ears. I also had Terje, full disclosure, as a teacher for a year, and we had a lot of fun. So I love him, and he's really like a guru. Guru. He sort of. It's just nice to be in the same room as him and talk about stuff.
Yeah.
But he comes in my ears at least a bit more from like the free jazz side or free improvisation side of stuff, and brings that aspect into the folk music.
It feels like, to my ears, that in Sweden there's been for a good few years now a lot of guitar players and percussion players coming in to the folk music and really trying to be a part of that sound in a way.
Yeah.
Whereas in Norway there's been a lot of like fusion projects where people have like kind of mixed folk music with other genres, and the goal hasn't necessarily been to just play folk music, but to create something new.
Yeah, I think that's the first stage that you go through. So I have this is not grounded in any sort of research or anything. It's just a sense that I think that maybe Sweden sort of started that sort of process earlier.
Yeah, I think so.
And then some people get really interested, because we have sort of guitar players and drummers. I identify as a folk musician. I can play normal drum kit, and I can play some pop music. I'm not so good anymore at keeping time though, because I'm too good to follow people. But so we have people dedicating themselves to the task of understanding the music, like Scandinavian folk music or Nordic folk music, and I think that there are more and more people like that. I think it's coming more and more here in Norway, also in Denmark and Finland.
But I think you're right.
Estonia.
Like a lot of the people who played with folk musicians back in the 80s and 90s in Norway, they identified as people playing with folk music, with folk musicians, not as folk musicians themselves.
Yeah.
And I often count myself in that category a lot too. Like it's as a non-melody player or as a non-traditional instrument melody player, it can be hard to like call yourself a folk musician. It can almost feel pretentious, almost.
Yeah, it's. I can totally understand that. For me, it was sort of a way to find my own sound and my own voice. Was instead of trying to get good at playing jazz, which I wasn't that good, or I didn't have the confidence to think I was that good, at least, and I was more interested in folk music also, which is, I mean, that's the most important thing, to focus on what you're if that you think is joyful. And
because there's no money in either of it. So.
no, exactly. That is true. No, but I think that for me, I really find it interesting that most bands and people here in Norway that play with in my like drummers at least, they play with jazz drummers.
Yeah,
and in some way I find that a little bit sort of sad. In a weird. I really want the drums to also have to be able to give that music, like as I said before, you can give it color and you're not basically needed. But if you put the normal thing is that there's a drummer, and that drummer picks up some brushes and plays on the snare drum a bit.
Yeah.
I'm being very sarcastic here in some way, but that it's very generalized, of course. But it's like, okay, I can't really use sticks because that's too loud, so I will take my brushes out.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely a dynamic thing. My kit, I play mostly with my hands, and I play a lot tambourine. The tambourine is my main instrument still, and that's my main instrument too. That has been the way I've gone into these tunes. That has been the way I've opened doors into this, and because I can bring the tambourine everywhere, I can bring it to jams, and I can get as close as I would have if I was playing fiddle. If I had my wait, I have to get my drum kit. Wait.
Yeah.
And then I have to set it up. Yeah, keep playing. And then it's like, that's not gonna happen.
No, and it's not easy sitting down at the party or something with like a big kit around you. So
yeah, you have a wall, but with only the tambourine, you can get up close, and it can still totally destroy the music. No, that's not. It's not. The tambourine doesn't give you. You still have to know how to play it and stuff like that. But so I'm really hopeful that there's gonna be more like like percussion players that get interested, because there's so much cool stuff happening in fiddle music in Norway, also Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Estonia.
So many great players these days.
Yeah, and it's a lot of interesting rhythmical things that you learn by going into this music. About, as we talked about, like the sort of asymmetrical meter, and also the sort of micro. I call it like rhythmical intonation, that you're able to intonate rhythmically with another person's sort of rhythmic world. So, and if I just say like, this is the way it's gonna be like
sound very stiff.
Or yeah, and that could be a really cool sound. And it's not I'm not saying it's bad.
No,
it doesn't. Yes, if the idea is to have the melody player be as sort of free as possible, because you have to remember that a lot of this is actually solo music, especially Norwegian folk music.
Yeah, going back to my point in
yeah, it's solo music. So why are other things needed? And a really nice project that a band I'm in now is called GKN5, which is Guro Kviftenesem's quintet.
And as I said, I had Guro on the podcast a couple of episodes ago.
Oh yeah, wonderful.
And we were talking about that, like how the difference between approaching playing folk music in a band as a fusion project, which is totally legit. Like that's one route to go. But she the way she described it in Sweden, that they had this thing, they would play together and it would sound traditional, which is kind of what we're describing now. Yeah,
exactly. And she decided to try to use her background as a Hardanger fiddle player, a solo Hardanger fiddle player, and she kind of searched for a way to do that with more instruments, but not to lose the fact that it's a solo music. So, and just to make it even more complicated, that kind of Hardanger music has a lot of improvisation built into there's not a set structure. It's not an A part and a B part. Exactly.
And there's like motive-based music. Which makes it very challenging to play it in a band.
It's like a chain of chain, a form like a chain. So this melody comes there, and then it goes on to this, and you don't really know how long she does that. And then so there's a lot of like small visual cues, and suddenly it's like, oh, we're in this part, okay. But our recipe was just to get really, really down in, so everybody knows the melodies extremely well. And then and now we recorded our second album and releasing that in the autumn, and I think we've gone like from the first album to the second, we've gone been a really good development. I really like playing with that, and
I really liked your first album, by the way. Like such a cool and unique sound. Like I haven't really heard the hardanger being played with a band in such a convincing way.
And just to be clear, in that project, I only play tambourine and
which is almost even more impressive. Like
so it's tambourine and then guitars, and then a clarinet and nyckelharpa and hardanger fiddle and hardanger demore. So and it's very melody based, and that's the sort of setting I love being in that setting. And for me, I've another part of my musical sort of experience is also free improvised music that I got in the early 2000s when I went to the school in Bollnäs. There was a lot of students at the jazz department there that was into free improvised music. And for me, in the start, I just felt that they were like playing an intro for forever. And then I got into organizing a festival. It's called Hagenfesten, and we in Dala-Floda, which has been a very important part of my life. And we did it 10 years in a row, and then we did it every other year until 2018. And right now it's in a bit of a sleeping mode, Hagenfesten, but it might reappear. And that has been a space for free improvised music, folk music, jazz, and different kinds of dance music and art and poetry during like usually 5 or 4 days festival in Dala-Floda and Dalarna. And there I've met some of the best free improvised musicians in the world. We have taken them to this place, and also I was a part of booking folk musicians, so I've had a lot of the best folk music, a lot of Swedish ones, of course, but also Norwegians playing. And from that festival, there's been a lot of collaborations happening. Like me and Olav Luxengård Mjelva from Sver, we did, or actually Olav brought me into that project that he had with an amazing singer called Sofia Jernberg from Stockholm. And she also lived in Oslo for a long time. She's a superb singer and a great composer within the sort of free improvised and new music scene. And she did a project with the Trondheim Jazz Orchestra, where they used Olav's instrumental music, both from Röros and from Hallingdal, which is one region is normal fiddle, that's the Röros tradition, and then Hallingdal is hardanger fiddle, which is the national instrument of Norway. Really, the Playboy fiddle, we call it. It's so pimped up, and it's that was a really interesting project with 11 musicians, and it was arranged by 3 of the sort of persons coming from. Sofia arranged, and Alexander Setson, a pianist, also arranged some music, and I can't remember the third person who did it. But in that context, I still couldn't get people to understand that it was not a syncopation. So the beat. Yeah, so they were still, you could still see the feet going straight when the music wasn't like that. But and I mean, you have a certain amount of time in those kind of projects. You're like, okay, we have to put that aside and just try to.
True.
So it's but for me, free improvisation has been a really important tool, especially when I practice myself to find sounds. Maybe I don't use that free improvisation when I'm playing, but in my head, I'm always improvising when I play. I that's my starting point, or like I always improvise. usually if there's a tune that I know, like if you play Pang, for example, with Sver, that was like the first tune we made.
Okay.
I have like some ideas that are sticking that I follow, but I don't really know how I get to those points.
No.
So there's always an improvisation, and so improvisation is super important for me. And these last years, I've been focusing on that in my masters and finding like old recordings with different versions of the same tune by the same player has been really cool, because you can hear that they play differently. Some play really the same, and some people are like, what? They are just suddenly this part is over there and it starts there and it loops this.
There's no rules really.
No, there's no rules, and that is very connected to dance, the dance way of dancing, because the dancing is like you learn a couple of first basic steps, and then maybe you learn some sort of things that you can do, but there's not like, okay, this is first and then comes this and then comes that.
No,
like you have to improvise that, and usually in this couple dance there's someone leading and someone's following, in the same way as the melody, I feel. Okay. So in some way you can also connect the sort of following role to the dance, because it's not, you're not just a piece of cloth that someone drags around the dance floor. No. You're there and you're dancing, but someone is leading the dance usually.
Yeah, and you're responding to it in a way.
Yeah, and so when I'm playing drums, I also think of myself in that role.
For example, the fiddle is leading.
The fiddler is leading,
music.
And I'm following in kind of the same way, because that's the quite similar as a like second voice or
so nice.
Voice player. So also within this free improvisation sphere, I've been doing solo concerts. My first solo concert was at Hagenfesten. Joel Grip, the sort of founder of Hagenfesten, a really amazing composer and human being, artist, and double bass player. He lives in Berlin now with his family. And he has said, Jens, you're going to have a solo concert. I have, it's 30 minutes, just do it.
Which is quite a long
and
piece of time.
I think I played 20 minutes. I thought I played for like 5 hours.
Yeah.
I could not, I don't think I could see anything after. I couldn't talk to anyone. I was totally drained.
Okay.
It was
to me, like I played very few solo concerts because I'm kind of coming from a band world into like folk music.
Yeah.
But for me, like people who are doing folk solo concerts, it's just so impressive to me, because even like the difference between doing a duo concert and a solo concert is miles apart in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like because you can share the spotlight and you can look at each other and interact with each other. Whereas if you're alone on your stage, all the responsibility is on you, all eyes are on you, and yeah, I'm really impressed of people who do it well.
But it's also freedom, because you can. And I'm a musician that is very, very bad at sort of playing something correctly. So I'm not the best like classical percussion player. Although I love playing classical, I don't get any opportunities now to do it. But I might try to start again. But so I've been, I'm really good at using my sort of errors that I do into something positive. And when you're playing solo, you have more space for that.
Yeah.
And so my solo concerts has been mostly been with just a tambourine. And eventually, like the last year, I started calling them tambourine baths. So you are welcome to come in, and you will be bathed in tambourine for an hour. And you can sit, you can lay on the floor. You can sit on a chair. You can walk around. You can dance if you want to. I will be sitting in the middle, and I will be playing tambourine for an hour. And so I get into some sort of, I get very present. That's what I like with music, that everything else in the world stops existing for a while, and it's only about
that's the goal, isn't it, when you're playing music, to be able to
so you can focus on only the sound that is. And when you're playing with other people, you always have to listen to everybody. Are you correct? Are you in time? How we're doing? How we're always doing? Everything is so. But when I'm playing those solo concerts, usually when I get into the right flow, there's nothing. I don't really look at the audience. I'm not there to look at audience for me. I'm there. It's very personal, and it's very. I want to draw them into listening to the sound intensely. And I use a tambourine with a microphone and then a bass amp, and after a while I turn it into like a feedback thing, and you can push the feedback and you can release it, and you can play different notes, sing with it, and it's a meditative sort of experience. I didn't want to call it tambourine meditations because it sort of had the wrong. I really like because a friend of mine, actually Joel Grip's mother, she's a yoga teacher also.
Okay.
And she has gong baths.
Okay.
So she has two big gongs, and you lie on the floor in her yoga studio, and she just plays the gong, like hits it, and you're in that. And so that was the sort of idea for that sort of concept. And I really enjoy doing that.
I have to try it one time.
Yeah. So I've
I'm guessing you're not doing them these days.
My idea was to do them each month, the whole spring, but that sort of didn't happen.
Went out the window
because of the whole COVID situation. But I did one in December and also in February at least. So that's has been like a sidetrack for me for several years, and the master's project was a way of sort of putting the spotlight on the my solo playing for a change. And so now I actually have like a show that I'm developing that it's going to hopefully be presented maybe next autumn.
Great.
With Silja also as a dancer and me as a drummer. So I'm really looking forward to working more with that.
Speaking of sidetracks, I see we're already way over an hour. But I want to make sure that we get to talk about one of your newest projects, which is the Folk Music Academy.
Yeah.
Which I'm very curious about. I've seen a lot of snippets on social media from you and your partner, or well, not partner in that way, but your business partner and bandmate Olav Mjelva.
Yeah.
The way you're like making this very, very thorough video course about Nordic and Scandinavian folk music. Nothing like that has ever been done on this scale, I think, before. So it's really, just tell us about, you're launching very soon, aren't you?
Yeah, we're actually launching in exactly a week from this recording on the 1st of July, in the year of the Lord 2020.
Exactly, yeah.
So, no.
Great year.
Yeah, great year. Well, in some ways, it's a different year, at least.
That's for sure.
The most different year. So the Folk Music Academy has been a topic of mine and Olav's in the tour car. Because usually...
it's like one of those ideas that you talk about, but you never get around to do it.
Yeah, exactly. We've been talking about this now for, almost... We got to know each other in 2009. I think we've been talking about it for at least 10 years almost. Back and forth and never really got into it. Because we have both been on tour a lot and doing other stuff. And then Olav sort of just started applying for grants maybe 2 years ago. I wasn't that part of that process. We always been talking about the ideas, both of us. But then we got some grants to start doing filming. So we put all the energy into getting as many musicians filmed.
So you brought in musicians from all over Scandinavia and have them film lessons basically?
Yeah, we brought them to Röros to the Olav's studio in Os, which is the Dala Kopa studio actually, Bent studio that Olav is also a partner in now. And we started filming them, and it's been a learning process. As that learning curve has been the steepest I've been.
Can you imagine, yeah.
Not knowing anything about aperture or light or white balances, or I knew how to sort of edit videos before that, but I've learned a lot because Olav, he is in charge of filming it, and I edit the videos in post, and it takes a long time because we really want it to be very, very instructive, and it's from a perspective of even if you're a really advanced player, you might not have to watch through the whole video because you might get the tune after 1 or 2 rounds, and that's fine. then you can get a lot of tunes. But if you really want to know how that musician thinks about that little part, about that double stop, about that drill, or there's a lot of information that sort of just pops up in when they're trying to describe something.
So that's what I think looks very promising about the project, is that it's not just scratching the surface; it's really going deep into all of these things.
It's going really deep, and it's we are trying to facilitate a space for people that can't. If you like, from the person that maybe have a fiddle or a guitar or accordion or something lying at home and just want to learn some tunes, and you don't really know how to play that much, we want to be able to be a space for that kind of person.
Great.
Up to the to the professional musician that are say that you are from Helsinki and you want to learn some Swedish tunes, or you are from Fagernäs in Valdres, which is one specific sort of valley where they have their dialect. You want to learn some tunes from Tovdal, then you can also use the site for that. So we want it to be a tool, basically.
And these videos will be available on the website as a subscription model. That's the idea.
Yeah. We are starting calling it kind of like the Netflix of folk music learning.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Because you subscribe for it, and the longer periods you subscribe for, the less you pay, of course.
Okay.
And then we wanted to be to create hopefully like a bit of an active community around it. So the choice, because in the start now it's been the choices of me and Olav on who to film, and we don't really want it to be like that.
No,
because our perspectives of, in the same way I've been talking about how you listen to music, it's your cultural luggage that you listen with.
Exactly.
And I really want it to be driven by the people using the site. So we are paying close attention to all comments that we receive on Facebook, and we're trying to find ways on how to really to communicate with the people using the site, so we can make it very for them.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's going to be a vast diversity of people using it.
Yeah.
Like I already know that even like world musicians like Mike Marshall is interested in it because he wants to learn some Nordic tunes, like a really amazing mandolin player, and so if we can sort of facilitate both the people that are really new to music or new to folk music, and the intermediate up to the really advanced, I think that would be amazing. And we're trying to find ways to have it to be like at least maybe one time each week or each other week. It's going to be some sort of master class on some sort of online digital forum, like Zoom probably, but we're not really sure yet.
Cool.
And it's really exciting, and it's been really fun because as I say, I have a degree as a music teacher, so I could bring in and Olav has been teaching a lot in workshops, so he knows that sort of setting, and I know the setting more also like a classroom. And even though this is not a classroom with a lot of people, it's
a virtual classroom.
Yeah, so we've been thinking a lot about the pedagogical process on how people present the tunes, and we try to get them get the musicians that we bring in. Most of them have been doing a lot of master classes and stuff too, so they're really, really good at sort of pinpoint issues and showing stuff that
still
are like hidden if you're not really so there's a lot of like secrets that you can learn from just hearing them talk about the way they do it.
So sounds...
and a lot of technique videos, how to tune the Hardanger fiddle, how to tune a nyckelharpa,
exactly,
how to like hold it while you're standing, stuff like that. So it has been a lot of fun, and the whole Corona situation this spring freed up enough time to so we could
because it
launch
sounds
it now.
really ambitious.
So it's gonna be it has been a fun journey. It's gonna be even more fun now when we're launching.
When are you launching?
On the 1st of July, next week. And
so where can people learn more if they want to sign up or
check
it out?
They can go to thefolkmusicacademy.com and check it out from there. And we're also on our main social medias are Facebook and Instagram. And there's also a YouTube account, but we're not really active on that yet. But we will be.
Great. So really looking forward to learn more about that.
Yeah, and this podcast is also part of the same I feel the same idea and sort of long-term idea for us at least is to facilitate for people to easier get so they can dive into the folk music. So this is a great way to meet people and to learn about musicians. And I'm really happy that you're doing this. I've been thinking about exactly the same thing for many years.
It's one of those things that you were saying, like you think about it for so long, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there with an empty calendar and
but I think it's amazing, and it's for folk music as a thing, as a scene. Also, it's really good for other people to be able to get a glimpse into it.
Because like we were talking before the recording about how a lot of like interviews with folk musicians are very surface based, like you try to get out some story about something that happened that everyone can relate to. But the idea with this podcast, and in a way I suppose your academy as well, is like to dive really deep and like in a way speak to the people in the scene in one way, but also people from outside the scene can get a glimpse of us in the scene in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So kind of in the beginning, I was a bit worried about being too nerdy on this podcast, but I've kind of put that aside now and just focusing on having great conversations about interesting topics, and I think that will draw the right people in.
Yeah, I guess I'm really happy that you wanted me to come here and talk about my sort of journey in this world, and I just hope that a lot of people that want to just check it out, the folk music podcast. I think it's an amazing idea, and the things I've heard yet has been amazing. So thank you for having me.
Thanks again, and big thanks to Riksen for letting us using the venue to do this podcast.
Yeah.
And let's go out in the sun.
Yay! Amazing. Thanks.